All right. Two guys in the cloud. Episode 18, Bob.
18.
We're
I was born on the
teenagers.
18th of the month of August, so this must be a lucky one for sure.
I like it. I have nothing to connect to 18 other than I was 18 once, and that was very dangerous. But it's back. So today,
good.
Yes, I made it. Happy to, I guess, talk about a very, very exciting topic. Actually, I'm fascinated by it, and it's AI in healthcare. So we're sort of connecting the dots today between, the cloud, AI, artificial intelligence, and how we can apply that, capability, well, I'll call it a capability today, into an industry. In this case, we're going to talk about healthcare, which has tremendous meaning in the world we live in. So, we're joined by Matt Jackson and Dave LePenske with Insight's digital innovation practice, who are going to help us kind of navigate this conversation and talk through all the different facets of it, and it should be fascinating. But today, I'm happy to introduce Matt. Let's start with you. Welcome, Matt, to the show.
Sure, thank you. Really happy to be here and talk about something that we're all passionate about. Just for some background, I came up through the ranks as a developer, so spent my time writing code on hands-on keyboard. Moved into enterprise architecture type role, worked with a lot of healthcare clients across the years, modernizing platforms and really driving insights for the healthcare industry. And then in my role at Insight today, I lead our services team. So all the folks that are actually out there engaged with clients, building solutions. We've got about 1,200 people today that work in this digital innovation space. And so I have the pleasure of still staying, engaged with our clients and helping them solve these really critical problems and drive really important outcomes. But I don't have to write as much code, although I do miss it.
Yeah, you know what? If I had $1 for every time I heard that,
I'm
not kidding. I don't like code anymore, but I miss it. But it's always that badge of honor. It is.
It is, and I like to tell people that my next career jump is going to be to go back to development role. There's something about putting on headphones, like cranking some music and coding for 12 hours straight, that just puts everything else to the side. You don't get that when you're doing 12 straight hours of half-hour online meetings.
No, although I can't say I really can compare it. The closest I've gotten to code is working with maybe Wix to build a website, and that's not code. So, but
I like the headphones and the Mountain Dew and the Doritos. So I'm in on that version.
It was more coffee and Red Bull for me, but
Red Bull. Okay, all right.
I spent my nights sleeping on the desk so I could just wake up and code more. But those days are a little past right now.
It was. Do you remember the social network? The whole Facebook story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's when I just got. That was when I just got jealous. Just that whole idea of, he just sort of put on the headphones, drank a beer, and built $1 billion business, and it looked like it took him 24 hours. And I want to do that too, right? Just like that.
It's not that easy. Never that.
Yeah. So
he's wired in. Yeah.
We have David LePenske. And David, please tell us all about your coding adventures, which are, no matter what they are, they're going to be more than mine. So let's hear it.
I'll race you to the bottom on that. So I am not a technologist by training or trade. So I am not a coder. And I've written a few lines of code in classes that and through work throughout the last 25 years I've been in healthcare and life sciences. So I stumbled into healthcare and life sciences a number of years ago, really focused on how to think through just beginning the process of modernizing the patient experience. And I went to work for Microsoft in their healthcare group and ran their group in Canada. And that was really the first foray from a platform perspective of a connected cloud experience for healthcare. So they had Health Vault, which is kind of the personal health record. And then they had a clinical unified information system, which is like a big cloud-based database and analytics engine for analyzing clinical information. And, this was early days. This was, almost 15 years ago now. And I then came to work for Blue Metal and met Matt Jackson at Blue Metal, and that precipitated into the acquisition of Blue Metal several years ago by Insight. And I've been in Insight DI ever since, really continuing to focus on healthcare and life sciences from an industry expertise perspective. And I think we're what's really exciting for me is healthcare has been such a complex animal in so many different respects for so long, and technology was never quite at the point where it could really start meaningfully addressing and attacking some of these big rock challenges, and we're finally there. We've reached a tipping point where, with largely in part to machine learning and AI tools, we're now really beginning to unlock some of the mystery and challenge of some of the larger healthcare challenges, and starting to give clinicians back more time, less time in systems, more time in front of patients, and we're starting to address some pretty significant healthcare, what I call opportunities, in terms of meaningfully addressing diseases such as cancer and other situations, and even the pandemic as it relates to COVID, which we'll talk about. So there's never been a better time in the history of healthcare to be in healthcare.
Wow, that was great. I love how you frame that with the big rock. I'm a big 80-20 guy, right? So, I always feel as if you can focus on that 20%, that's going to get to 80% of whether it's the pain point or the opportunity. It's a little bit like a big rock. So how would you frame today's big rocks in healthcare? Where should that focus be?
So it's in a couple of areas. The challenge is the data is continuing to grow in healthcare, but the challenge has historically been is how is it organized? Is it the same in one hospital as it is in another hospital? And the answer for a long time was no. Just even human nature, being able to check a box or not check a box, and coding created this disparity of understanding one patient compared to a patient with a similar condition, right? So standardization in the healthcare industry has helped to, over the last 20 years, to kind of level that a little bit, and we're making even more significant advancements internationally in terms of standard-based coding. So we understand, a tonsillectomy in Cleveland, Ohio, is the same thing as a tonsillectomy in Italy, right? So, and I'm generalizing, but the opportunity for us to then apply learning on more common sets of data, and to help use AI and ML tools to recognize when data might be coded slightly differently, but we're able to say, that this information or data set is actually the same, and we can kind of pool and pull these together for analysis. So I think certainly around what we call informed clinical decision support, we don't want to use AI and ML to make clinical decisions for doctors and nurses. What we wanted to do is put the breadcrumbs in place to say, here's why we think this is going to happen. And we want to give them the reasons, and then they can quickly go investigate those from a clinical perspective and make an informed decision about patient care. And also, I talked about giving back more time. As of 10 years ago, there were clinicians spending actually a majority of their time in front of computers, entering in data, doing manual data entry about their patients. And it started to pull down the interest in medicine, and we saw a decline in people entering medical school, and that's starting to tick back up again because automation and natural language processing, in terms of being able to speak your clinical notes and be able to have that entered in as data in real time and searchable and queryable and discoverable. So we're creating tools and opportunities for clinicians to be quicker and faster about the things that they still need to do about the patient charting and so forth. But we're also giving them back more time for patient care, and we're also making that data more quickly and readily available for discovery and developing other insights. So, and I think it's really impacting the whole continuum of care, from everything from chronic disease management into some of the more challenging areas of cancer research, and even the pandemic, as I mentioned.
Yeah, fascinating. The standards part, I wouldn't have thought about. That's the sort of thing where you don't know until you get into an industry to really truly understand the pain points. The idea that you can't create or can't correlate patterns or come to conclusions between different hospitals and different patients until you have standards in terms of how you capture that data. And healthcare is just one of those industries where, the way it grew up, I can see how that was just very different depending on where you were. So it's great to hear that there's a standard being built. And when you talk about that, is there a name for that code that you talk through? Like, I think I immediately go to things like HTML, in terms of a standard language, but you have some sort of different healthcare vernacular, I'm sure. Crickets.
Yeah, no, David.
We're calling that language crickets.
You stumped him.
Coding, and then and David obviously hasn't been a developer coding, but he spent a lot of his time in medical coding, and so like medical coding, and there are standards, and he'll have to rattle off the names of the official standards, but it's really how you capture everything from the diagnosis to the procedure to the services that were performed. So there's different alphanumeric codes for each one of these things, and they get updated as procedures advance. But you're absolutely right. Like when we look at the systems that we're building today versus 15, 20 years ago, our ability to cross-reference different healthcare systems and look at patterns and trends has drastically changed because of the ability to create kind of common data sets. And when we look at some of the solutions that we've built over the last number of years, and I can get into the technology a little bit, but just kind of sticking to the outcomes that we're driving, we're able to look at these massive data sets that span dozens. The average healthcare system has over 100 different systems that are capturing data. And those are not necessarily aligned, but having some common data elements allows us to cross-reference and build more advanced machine learning models that can look for patterns, make recommendations. And some of the stuff that we've been able to do, there was an account that a client that David and I worked with a couple of years ago, a health provider on the West Coast, and they'd spent 2 years trying to come up with a model to better predict sepsis outbreaks, so secondary infections, which can be some of the most deadly, conditions to occur within the hospital. And they were looking for, patterns across these different data sets that would indicate that they were susceptible to one of these outbreaks. And they, like I said, been working for 2 years and had built a model that was reasonably accurate. We were able to come in there using more advanced machine learning techniques and train a model against the historical data in about 2 weeks that was significantly more accurate than what they had done over the past couple of years. And that's a great use case. We like to talk about how quickly we were able to translate the data into value for their health system. But the reality is, if they hadn't spent those 2 years aggregating the data, normalizing the data, there's no way we could have come in and built a model in 2 weeks. And across the systems, what we find is, your 80-20 rule, Elliot, 80% of the work in building a really cool machine learning AI type model is just munging the data together in a way that you can, actually understand it. And so, these systems that, provide these great insights are critical. But the majority of the work that we're doing within, especially the healthcare provider space, but it also, the insurer space and the, and other kind of secondary medical supply chain type organizations, they're all working on modern data estate projects today. Like that's got to be the hottest thing in healthcare, is just understanding how they modernize their data estate to take these 100+ systems, normalize them around the coding, but other just patient demographics, making sure that things are captured in the same way, so that they can drive insights off that data. And once they've got that data state in place, then all of a sudden everything just kind of pops open. So it might be sepsis one day, but the next day, there's a COVID outbreak, and you need to get on, on top of what type of trends you're seeing within your patient population, so that you can make better decisions about everything from treatment plans to staffing levels that you may need based on an outbreak of a pandemic. And so, those are things, obviously it's very relevant in the last year, but, I remember we were working with a health commission when H1N1 broke out. So we were in the process of building actually a demographics. It was a data system to kind of predict likelihoods of chronic diseases across, was in Boston, across the population. So looking at demographics in different neighborhoods and trying to understand where was there a higher, likelihood to have childhood asthma, right, or some other chronic condition, and then correlating that to things like pollution and green space and demographics, socioeconomic, so that we could build better healthcare policy for the city of Boston. And in the process of doing that, H1N1 breaks out. And all of a sudden, I remember meeting with the health commissioner for the city, and she just said, like, listen, there's got to be a way. We've got all this data. Like, how can we use this data to better respond to this outbreak? So it was amazing to see that because we had the data in place, we could respond really quickly. And we ended up updating their website, targeting, kind of tracking populations where there were outbreaks, and then doing, health policy and really getting in front of the community at that point to talk about things that you could do to stop the spread. So like all of that kind of came back to me. I won't name names, but this health director is now the health director of one of the largest cities in America, and she was on the news. I saw her on like kind of the nightly news, talking about how she was managing the outbreak in the city that she leads now. So it's kind of come full circle, but it's all based on that modern data estate.
Yeah,
that's a great story.
Yeah, it is. It's a fantastic story, and has to be rewarding too, in the sense that this is when all that work can pay off in terms of saving lives. So that's pretty rewarding, I imagine. But
David, to steal his thunder, the holy grail of healthcare is like opportunities where you can reduce the cost and improve patient outcomes. And so that everybody wins in that situation. You're able to maybe reduce the labor or the services, unnecessary services that you're providing by doing the treatment smarter based on data. But that also drives better outcomes for your patients. There's very few industries where you can get that win-win, right? And typically you're either driving more revenue and maybe cutting back on customer service, or vice versa. But in healthcare, you really can achieve both.
Yeah. No, it's tremendous. So I'm fascinated a bit by the normalization of data, because it seems as if, there's, hey, the answers are in the data, but to really get the answers, you have to think about the data beforehand to really try and understand what is the data that you want to capture over time to answer the questions that you may not even know you want to ask in the future. In the sense that, you're normalizing. So the first exercise on here is we want to normalize our data. Well, that's because you're capturing X amount of data. But if you captured X times 2, you may be able to solve for bigger questions down the road, but you have to think through what those questions are. So it strikes me as maybe an iterative approach, but it's that moment where you have to ask yourself, what's the data we want to capture first, and then understand how to normalize it.
Kind of. There's two ways to approach it, but it's interesting. So when we engage with a client, we typically will ask them, well, what questions do you want to ask your data? Right? Like this is the process here. You get to ask questions, and we can help you come up with answers, but we actually need to know what questions you want to ask first. Now, at the same time, there's no harm in modernizing the data estate proactively and saying, hey, we have these 18 systems, and we believe that if we could aggregate data across these systems, there'd be better ad hoc reporting and possibilities in the future. So there's some amount of integration work you can do in advance to build that data warehouse or deal with master data management so that you can have common codes for different categories of data. So there's plenty of upfront investment you can do, but especially when you get into the AI space, I think the best question to ask is, well, what do you want to learn from your data? The sepsis one was a good example where they kind of knew the question they were asking and then went to find all the data that they would need to answer it. But another one, and I don't want to steal all David's thunder, so I'll let him talk about this client a little bit too, but we had a client that came to us and they said, we are spending more on labor than we should. We've looked across our systems, and we believe that we're staffing unnecessary skills at unnecessary times, and we're not aligning it to the actual needs of our patients, the number of patients in beds, with the types of conditions that they have. And so we want to find out a better way to determine who should be on staff at a given point in time, how many nurses we need, how many doctors with these specialties do we need, so that we can better predict our labor needs. And we believe that, again, will serve that dual purpose of reducing our labor costs, which is the number one cost in the health system, by being smarter about who we staff on what shifts, but also providing better outcomes for our patients, because we're going to be able to provide the right care for them, right? So we'll have the right people on staff when they need them. And so a very broad question, but it led us to kind of a multi-year engagement with this healthcare provider, to really understand everything from how they, to David's point, how they code, right? How are they capturing information accurately? It turns out as we started to ask these questions of the data, we determined that there were some significant problems in how they were capturing data. So one of the first things we started experimenting and running models like, okay, well, let's find out, how many people you have at the hospital with this condition, and like, is it more than you would expect? There's something called length of stay, which is associated with these codes. So somebody comes in, and they've got chronic bronchitis. That's their diagnosis, whatever the alphanumeric code is, and they say, okay, well, the average person that gets diagnosed with that code stays in the hospital for 4 days. So then all of a sudden you have some model to say, okay, well, we should expect this person to stay here for this long, which also determines, how much it's going to cost to keep them here and all of that, and also how many people we need to support them. Well, you could look at it and say, okay, well, what's your average for this health system? And if your average is 6 days, then what are you doing wrong, right? How can you better come up with a treatment plan so when somebody comes into the hospital and they get diagnosed with chronic bronchitis, that you treat them, more efficiently. Maybe you have to change the order in which the tests are performed, et cetera. Well, it turns out we ran this model for one of their hospitals, and the data was way off. They were there for like twice as long as you would expect. And so it turns out about a year before, they had actually changed the coding. It used to be, it actually used to be something to do with natural childbirth delivery. And they had swapped the codes, or there was some coding issue that it turns out people were generally miscoding it, like a huge percentage of the time. And so you can imagine all the billing issues that happen after the fact. Somebody that goes in there for childbirth gets billed for bronchitis, and you're like, wait. And they get charged differently, and you have different staff. So all of a sudden you look at this data and you say, we need more people in this unit, when really you need them in the childbirth unit, right? So it was interesting when we started to ask the questions of the data, we started to get answers we didn't expect, which led us down different paths, not just coming up with these models for staffing, which was the original goal, but also realizing that, we could do education on the ground to improve the quality of care. So David, I don't know if you want to jump in and add to that. That's one of the greatest stories, I think, in both of our careers. But,
yeah. Really... And we can name that client, which is great because we've done some public case studies, and there's a great video case study on the Insight website in the healthcare section, Steward Healthcare. But yeah, the CEO came to us and said, look, I'm paying a lot of money, millions of dollars a year for length of stay and labor analytics software, and it's not telling me anything that I don't already know about my health system. I can't ask it the questions that I want to ask it to get answers, to have a better understanding of what I'm going to do as a CEO to lead us into better outcomes and better care, right? And lowering costs, to Matt's point. So what I'm most excited and really proud of, and we do some great things. I mean, whether you're a payer, a provider, a life sciences company, medical device company, our job and our goal, whether it's one project or thinking really at the macro level, is to help healthcare and life sciences companies become continuously learning through their data. And that could be just one small project, or that could be an enterprise level project. But that's, we want to improve the clinical outcomes. We want to improve the quality of care. We want to improve patient safety. We want to reduce costs. And we want to do that in across not only just the care models, but also, financially, from a business operations perspective, where and how can things be optimized to all contribute towards, really becoming a continuously learning health system. And so one of the things that I'm most proud of is we like to do things quickly in healthcare, and nobody in the industry is used to getting anything of real value very quickly for very little cost. A lot of times you're talking about, an EMR upgrade, and you're going to spend a couple $1 billion, and it's going to take you 3 years, and the average cost of that integration is like $33,000 per bed per year for every bed you have in your hospital to organizationally change from one bulk system to another. Where we can come in 4 to 6 weeks, and as Matt said, we love to say, what questions would you love to ask of your data that your systems prevent you from answering? And let's understand what those questions are, or that question is. Let's understand what data, from which data sources we need to pull that information from, and then, what condition is the data in? Every time you get data, you need to assess the quality of the data, because obviously, if the quality of your data isn't good, then you're going to drive incorrect predictions, right? So you really need to make sure that you have good data quality and cleansing, and then you can ask the data the questions. So we'll typically do these types of rapid discovery sessions, what we kind of call proof of value sessions, in 4 to 6 weeks. So we're actually taking a question that they can't ask of their data today, of their legacy systems. We put all this together, and then we basically provide the answers out in a couple of role-based actionable views. One might be for a doctor from a clinical perspective, and one might be from the hospital operations director, the COO, in terms of the business and financial implications of that same patient question. And we're able to kind of give two role-based actionable views, and we're kind of micro-solving a larger problem because we're taking a subset of the data, or what we call a vertical slice of the data, just to be able to kind of prove it out and do it quickly. But it's real, it's their data, it's their information, and they're seeing it in a completely new way, and they're able to start, you know, working and huddling around this new information and this new methodology, and that gets really exciting for them and for us. And so then we can take another 2 to 3 week sprint and be able to iterate on that. So it's a great way for health systems who are strapped for cash these days, especially, to be able to incrementally invest in innovation, see an output and an ROI, and then be able to incrementally invest again. And as they incrementally invest, we're able to provide incremental value, which then tips into an MVP. Maybe it's deployed at 1 unit of a hospital, and then after that's successful, then they can roll it out to all 38 of their hospitals. So, you know, that POC and that project that we started for Steward Healthcare, it turned into a 4-year project. But now today, Steward has 38 hospitals across the United States. They're able to predict by diagnosis code every bed for every unit of every floor of their hospital, their patients, up to 3 weeks in advance, with a 98% accuracy. Now, if you're able to predict who your patients are going to be by diagnosis code up to 3 weeks in advance, you can do some pretty interesting things. You can harmonize your clinical staffing model because you understand, to Matt's point, when and where you're going to need clinical resources. You don't have to bring people in on their days off. You don't have to send them home early from shift because you don't have enough patients to care for, which creates, you know, dissatisfaction problems for your clinical staff. You're also able to reduce length of stay. So to Matt's point, we've been able to reduce length of stay at Steward by 1.5 days per admitted patient. We just eliminated the natural gaps in care between waiting for a lab result and then being prescribed a medication, or waiting to be discharged, but you're waiting for your physical therapist and your temporary meds to come to your room. So we've been able to work and create intelligence alongside or above these legacy systems. And what we're able to do is pull the information out, cleanse it, learn from it, and then feed that information back into those systems, or create new, more modern workflows. But we want to harmonize it with the natural workflow of the health systems to be able to have them engage with the data in the easiest way possible, and be able to make the biggest difference in an easy and intuitive way as we can. And then the last thing was supply chain. So Steward's been able to start ordering medications and vaccines and other supplies near their expiration date at a discount, because they know when and where and exactly what they're going to need in terms of quantities before those things expire. So Steward in the last 4 years has been, we call it ROII, return on innovation investment. They've been able to realize a return on innovation investment of over $150 million, which is massive for any health system. So those types of projects are super exciting, but so often they start with this 4 or 6 week, investigation and question around, a specific area, and then, they can take off and grow. And we love to grow projects with them.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of the iteration thing. The idea that you don't try and whatever the metaphor is, you're not boiling the ocean, you're not, whatever it is. Right. I like the idea of starting small, learning, iterating, moving from there. That always is a good formula. Let me pivot really quick. So coming into this topic, I actually immediately thought that we would get into, the edge or devices or capturing data in healthcare through devices. It just seems like a great cross section. Am I off, or is that how real is that in healthcare right now?
So it's very real, but it goes back to those 100 different sources of data. So obviously, if you've been in any kind of healthcare environment, there's edge devices everywhere, right? Every within every operating room, or every bed is connected at this point. And so the market is a little bit saturated in that sense, because most of these devices are built by large industries that have been in the healthcare space for decades. So I'd say there's probably not as much of an opportunity to add more devices to that ecosystem. I mean, there's always devices being added by the medical device manufacturers. So it's more how do we harness the data and aggregate it across all these devices that are already being used. We don't want to complicate. David spoke about when we first introduced laptops and desktops into the patient rooms. It really changed the dynamic with the provider in a negative way. And so now we're able to introduce technology to actually cut down on the number of devices that need to be used to engage with the patient and really treat that patient effectively. And so, there's plenty of use cases around intelligent edge and IoT. But we find that there's, just like with the EMR deployments, they make huge investments in deploying these major systems. And so I think David said it really well. We're working kind of alongside or above these legacy systems. Where we can provide value in integrating data and coming up with new insights or optimizing operations within healthcare is really where we provide that quick ROI, because they're so used to those big capital purchases, like but outfitting a hospital with new equipment or deploying a new EMR or even an upgrade is such a massive investment in time and energy and cost for these systems that we need to be able to respond quickly and provide value. And it typically comes in the form of new insights that can improve patient care or operational improvements that can reduce cost. And those are the use cases. It's no coincidence that that's where we focused. And I even like, this is a podcast about cloud, but we put it right in there that this is really about AI for healthcare. There's plenty that we could talk about in cloud and edge and in applications that's happening in healthcare. But especially with everything that's happened in the last year, time to insight, time to value on the data is probably the thing that's most top of mind within that space. And so yes, there's cool use cases. We've done some where we created like operating room of the future, where we're monitoring temperature, humidity, making sure there's no outbreaks or growth of bacteria that could potentially cause an infection with the patient in the operating room. But I'd just say the reality is there's less investment there right now than there is in gaining these insights, improving operations, improving the patient efficiency.
That makes perfect sense. Bob, did you have a question? I
saw. Yeah. So guys, I was thinking that obviously you guys had some great insights and great projects in the healthcare, but healthcare also has the most sensitive data possible for other, patient information and things like that. So how do you protect a patient's sensitive data as you garner insights across, a large number of patients? And how do you guys keep that patient sensitive data secure?
Yeah, I'll speak to it from a technology standpoint, but a lot of it is actually on the business side as well. Dave can speak to that. I think there was a real turning point maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago, where a lot of health systems realized that the investments being made by the big hyperscalers, so primarily Microsoft and Amazon, Google, coming on strong here. The investments that these organizations were able to make in securing the data and securing the environments were significantly greater than any health system could make. And so you're looking at these data centers and these hospitals that are literally at risk every day, both from security vulnerabilities, but I've even talked to hospitals where their data centers got flooded. There were weather issues or power issues that would bring down patient care. And so the resiliency, the scalability, and the security in the cloud, I think has really taken hold in the last half decade to decade, where they've realized that, okay, if you've got 100 different systems generating data at the edge, right, in a localized data center, or even just on the devices within the room, within the hospitals themselves, that's where the biggest risk for a data breach is. It's not once you get it up into the cloud. Now, granted, you have to be focused on policies in the cloud to make sure that you're managing your security and your keys and all these things properly, but that's where a company like Insight can come in and develop best practices for governance and policies in the cloud. If you look at any major outbreak security vulnerability, whether it's in healthcare or retail, it typically happens at the edge. Somebody comes in and they're able to tap into some system that's transmitting data from the edge up to a data center or to the cloud, and they're able to intercept that feed, decrypt it, and gain data from that. It's very rare that you hear about somebody breaking into a data warehouse in the cloud and capturing all of that data. So it's really about the technology and putting in the right governance and policies at the data warehouse level. But more so, it's about how are people managing passwords, right? It's the basics, right? How are these? Are we doing an audit of all the edge devices and applications to make sure that we're encrypting those data feeds as they get aggregated? Are we looking at any type of localized data stores? We're well past the days, hopefully, of people writing their passwords on sticky notes and putting them on the laptops. But I think we've probably all been into a doctor's office where you've seen that sticky note and you think that's not secure. And so it's a human issue as much as it's a cloud security issue. But long story short, I think most CIOs or chief security officers in healthcare systems have realized that getting it to the cloud is actually the most secure place for the data to live.
Yeah, speaking of sticky notes, I've seen a lot of Windows XP at my doctor's office. That scares me as well, right? I mean, my goodness.
So when we talk about the data and we talk about collecting the data and then we talk about it, being centralized and us analyzing the data, that is I would call that business intelligence, right? And I think beyond that, when we talk about AI, it's, for lack of better terms, it's applying algorithms to come up with predictive outcomes based on the data that we've collected. So maybe we could explore that a bit. Like when we talk about AI, how do we jump from a BI environment into an AI outcome? What is it that we're doing in the cloud? And I know that there's different answers to that. Azure has an answer, AWS is an answer, and in some facet, it's applying a specific service to that data. But what does that mean, right? And how does that really translate from a healthcare perspective? So I'm leading you a bit, but I think that's a fascinating part of the world, where that came from and what is it?
Yeah, and there's people tend to munge those two things together quite a bit. Creating an end user reporting dashboard so people can slice and dice data and understand kind of correlations is not AI. It's critical, and we do a lot of it within healthcare and other industries. But I actually think that the use case that David talked about with Steward, like that was we were aggregating data, real time and historical data trends, running models against it that would then predict, okay, so tomorrow, a week from now, 3 weeks from now, these are how many people you need working in these roles at these hospitals, and then feeding that data into a staffing plan. So if you're head of nursing in a healthcare system, you've got to build out your schedule for the next month. There's an app that you go in there, it's a calendar, you pick who's going to be on what shifts. But we're able to populate that with recommendations now by saying, hey, we think you're going to need this many people on this date. And it could, it's crazy stuff. It's not just, okay, well, what's happening with on the ground in the hospital? It could be, and we had these conversations. Okay, well, one of our hospitals is located near, Fenway Park. We noticed a spike on game days, right? Like we need to correlate external data, like the Red Sox schedule, into our staffing model. Like we were joking, we might need to take the moon cycles into account for the maternity ward. The old fable that there's more. I think all 3 of my kids were born on full moons, so there might be some truth to it. But do we need to correlate that? Is there social data that we need to correlate? If there's a large protest, right, is that going to lead to an increase in staffing needs in the hospitals closest to those locations? And so that's where it gets interesting with kind of the ML part of it. You build these models, you run against historical data, you add new data sets into it, and you say, okay, can we find any correlations there? Can we increase the accuracy of our future predictions by running against historical data? And then the last piece, though, is, okay, well, then how do you make it actionable? Right. So you're making these predictions. In the labor case, you could say, okay, well, here's our predicted staffing, let's put it into our labor management system. But for something like, the sepsis example, how do we make sure that, somebody that's in the hospital can take action? If we know that there's some condition, it could be environmental or it could be caused by, maybe the load of patients with certain conditions in the hospital at the time. How do we then get that information back in front of the doctor, the nurse, the clinician that can respond to it? So as much as it's cool to kind of run the data and build the models, it goes back to there's there's an OCM, like, implementing these systems changes the patient provider experience. And so you need to think through that whole equation. And that's why it really is true digital transformation, because you're transforming the data and the solution, but you're really changing the way and hopefully improving the way that providers are interacting with their patients.
I think to Matt's point too, outside the provider realm, AI is really starting to make a difference in outpatient care. So 68% of chronic disease is lifestyle modifiable and preventable. So when you think about our propensity for change and evaluating and understanding how motivated are we to lose weight because we're pre-diabetic, what causes and opportunities are there in my life, in my history, in my health that can be motivational or more motivational for me as opposed to Matt or you or anyone else. So a great project that we're working on right now has to deal with something that's very applicable to COVID for so many people, is loneliness. Loneliness is equivalent to a reduction in your lifespan. It's kind of similar to smoking 15 cigarettes a day or more, or obesity. The challenge of loneliness is a $6.8 billion a year problem in the United States. And a third of adults today are chronically lonely, and we're seeing it in other populations. Certainly teens are having a significant challenge not being in school. So we're working with a company that is working to actively address loneliness, and it has a correlated outcome. They've been able to work with a health system in the Southwest, and in 6 months' time, they've been able to save Medicare and Medicaid patient spend by over $5,000 per patient in just 6 months, because they're basically attacking it in two ways. They have a call center where you can actually call in and talk to humans and have conversations and just connections with other people, and those connections and those call center contacts are curated in their database. And then there's also a bot, a personal health assistant, which also is able to reach out to them, any time of day or night. And so it's the combination of the two, the personal and then the digital, that are working to address loneliness. But we're basically about ready to embark on a project that is going to really make this bot and the call center completely neural connected and state of the art with respect to personalizing the communications and making the conversations more meaningful for all of the recipients. And they're looking to branch out. Their business was primarily focused on seniors who aren't oftentimes digitally fluent, don't have the latest, greatest hardware and technology. So they had to create a bot that was kind of slimmed down with respect to its functional capabilities. Now, as they're looking to continue to address that segment of the population, but also start to look at other segments of the population who are more digitally fluent and have more up-to-date hardware, then that's going to dynamically change the game in terms of how we can use these tools, in addition to other things, with a patient's permission, social listening, also, being able to understand, that I, went on a 5K walk, and, I'm pre-diabetic and went on a 5K walk, and I just posted that to my Facebook post, or diet and fitness or nutrition applications or devices that you seem to that you're working with. With your permission, again, we can start to build a better understanding of you and personalize the content and the contact with you in a way that hopefully is going to be not only more resonant, meaningful for you, but also be more motivational and point you to better outcomes that, again, improve your health over the long term and help to reduce the strain and the cost of unnecessary care delivered, because you're not more physically in tune with your health state.
Do you remember the movie Her?
Yep.
Does that sound similar?
I don't quite want to go to the Her example, but yeah, I mean, look, you're seeing we're working on digital pets, We're starting to see the opportunity not only for you to create. Maybe you had a dog when you were a kid, and that was your favorite pet ever, and you can recreate your dog and begin to have. We're seeing the confluence of more digital connection with people to digital forms and digital things that have a great deal of meaning. It goes into your past, into your memories, and into significance for you apart from someone else. And I think that's an interesting area where AI is able to take us quickly and do it at scale by learning.
I actually have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry,
for Matt.
Bob. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got a question for Matt. Matt, for that hospital near Fenway, did patients increase when the Red Sox lost?
They lost to the Yankees.
Yeah, right. I'm sure that you. I don't need a machine learning algorithm to tell me that one. That one. I'm sure.
I think that's got to be for true. All right. Good.
I think a few minutes. I have one last question, and it's a big one. So take it for where you want. As I thought through that last conversation, I said her, and it really what I meant was along the lines of, we are lucky to be in a position where we can have these kind of conversations and actually affect outcomes. But it occurs to me that there is this, almost ethical thing that is a layer to it all, right? And I wonder what your thoughts are on that, in the sense that when we talk about artificial intelligence, when we talk about reaching into someone's life to help them manage loneliness by creating personalities, there is a good outcome, but it's also just like anything else with technology, it can cut both ways. There's good and bad. How do you guys personally think through that? I mean, I think it's real. If we're technologists or in technology, we exist within society and we have to think about these things. How do you think about that?
So
it's a deep question.
Yeah, David probably has a deeper answer, but I think as long as you're driving positive outcomes for patients, I think healthcare is actually a little bit easier. When you get into some other industries, there's more conflict between, like in the financial services, do banks make more money when their clients make more money or when their clients pay them more, right? And so there's a conflict. I think there's different models for healthcare. Accountable care is a good example where hospitals and providers get paid based on the outcomes of their patients versus the amount of procedures that they perform. And so I think that in this space, you're just striving for improved patient outcomes. Typically has the result of driving down cost and improving the operational models as well. So there's a nice there's other examples where you prescribe more tests, you prescribe more drugs, and it drives up healthcare costs, and that provider might get paid more. But I think with the organizations that we've worked with, they're really looking for that win-win, that Hail Mary where you can improve the outcomes and drive down costs. You always have to keep ethics in mind, but this is one industry where ethics is part of the discussion from day one, from probably the first day of med school or nursing school to every day in the job. So I think from an ethical standpoint, moral standpoint, this is one of the best industries to work in because you feel good about the work that you do. And there's some big brother type solutions when you get all this data that you have to watch out for. But in my experience, people are well intentioned, and people also know when they've crossed the line. And that's at the core of our values as a company at Insight too. We're not going to work with clients that maybe have unethical outcomes that they're driving. But in the healthcare space,
yeah, and to be clear, that it isn't an Insight question. It's a it's like I think there's it's in the fabric to think about. That's all. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely, and I get it. And I've definitely seen, I've got plenty of friends that are in the financial services and work for hedge funds, and I won't speak to their ethics, but it's nice to work with a healthcare provider, especially in trying to drive positive outcomes for patients.
I hope that some of these solutions can come to more of the patient side of it, right? The patient experience. I don't understand why I have to fill out the 10 same forms every year when I go to the doctor. Right. there's got to be a patient experience here somewhere that can be automated, so I don't have to do that every time I go to a different doctor, or even see the same doctor every year. Being able to take that and bring that into more of a patient customer care, I hope, is the next phase of this, because I think there's a lot that can be done there to protect and normalize that data, so we don't have to be so darn repetitive every time we see the doctor.
It's a data integration issue. The reason you do that is, I mean, obviously it's a liability thing. That's why they want you to fill that stuff out. But it was the inability to share data in the past that made you do it all the time. And so I think, if you actually go to a provider today, if you're in a large network, I think you'll see improvements there. I mean, I've seen it even just with COVID, and when I go to get a test, my doctor knows about it. I didn't have to sign, or maybe I did sign something a long time ago, but not every single time. And it's a little bit more integrated as people could become more comfortable sharing data. But that's when you can watch out for, both from a security perspective as well as a ethical perspective, that there's probably an oversharing you have to watch out for too. Yep.
Agreed. Great topic today, guys. Very informative.
Yeah.
Really good stuff.
I really, we're grateful. Thank you guys for joining us. Very, very appreciative.
It was our pleasure.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Great. Thanks
All right,
again,
guys. Well, we'll sign off from episode 18. Hopefully I'm right about that. Thank you, everybody, for listening in, and we will be chatting with you soon.
See you next time.